My name is Robert Callahan, but everyone's always called me Bob. I'm 68 years old now, and I've spent most of my life with grease under my fingernails and the smell of motor oil in my nose. I owned a small auto repair shop in a quiet town in Ohio for over 30 years. To most people, I probably looked like just another working man. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary. Just Bob the mechanic, fixing transmissions and changing oil. But here's the thing about life. It's never quite what it seems from the outside. People see what they want to see. They make their judgments, draw their conclusions, and move on. My own kids did that to me. After my divorce in 2009, they looked at their old man and saw a failure. A guy who lost his house, lost his wife, lost everything that mattered. They saw someone not worth their time. What they didn't see, what nobody saw, was what I kept locked away in a drawer in my apartment. A single piece of paper. Stock certificates. Just some shares in a little tech startup that a friend convinced me to invest in back in the 90s. Everyone thought I was crazy then. Hell, maybe I was. But that paper, that secret, it represented something more valuable than they could imagine. Something that could change everything for my family, if only they'd give me the chance. There was one day that changed everything between me and my children. One moment that drew a line in the sand and put me on one side and them on the other. I was 48 years old when my daughter Sarah told me I wasn't invited to her wedding. My own little girl. The one I taught to ride a bike. The one I stayed up with when she had nightmares. She looked me in the eye and said I was an embarrassment, that I'd bring shame to her special day. I stood there in my worn-out jeans and old flannel shirt, and something inside me just broke. But I didn't fight it. I didn't beg. I just nodded and walked away, carrying that weight with me every day since. This is my story. It's not pretty, and it's not always easy to tell, but it's real. It's about the distance between what people see and what's actually true. It's about family, pride, and the secrets we carry. And it's about whether love can survive when everything else falls apart. If you're someone who's ever felt misunderstood, ever felt invisible, or ever wondered if the people you love really see you, stay with me. This story might mean something to you. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1956. America was different then, simpler, maybe, or at least that's how I remember it. My father, Thomas Callahan, worked at a steel mill, and my mother, Margaret, kept our small house running like clockwork. We didn't have much, but we had enough. 3 kids in a 2-bedroom house, and somehow it never felt crowded. It felt like home. Dad was a quiet man, the kind who said more with his hands than his words. He could fix anything. A broken fence, a leaky pipe, a radio that stopped working. I'd watch him in our garage on Saturday mornings, his big hands moving with surprising gentleness over some broken thing, bringing it back to life. He never explained what he was doing. He just did it, and expected me to watch and learn. Bobby, he'd say. He was the only one who called me that. A man who can't fix things is only half a man. You understand. I was maybe 7 or 8 then, and I didn't really understand. But I nodded anyway because that's what you did with my father. You listened, you watched, and you learned. My childhood was filled with those quiet lessons. How to change a tire. How to read an engine's sounds and know what was wrong. How to work with your hands and take pride in a job well done. These weren't things we talked about. They were just the way we lived. School was another story. I wasn't what you call a star student. Reading never came easy to me, and math felt like a foreign language. But shop class, that was my kingdom. Give me wood to shape or metal to weld, and I was in my element. My teachers said I had practical intelligence. I think that was their nice way of saying I wasn't book smart. But I didn't care. I knew who I was. I was going to work with my hands, just like my dad. When I was 12, something happened that I've never forgotten. My father came home from the mill one day, and I could tell immediately something was wrong. His face was gray, his shoulders slumped. He'd been laid off. The mill was cutting workers, and after 15 years of loyalty, he was out. I remember my mother crying in the kitchen, trying to hide it from us kids. I remember the tension in our house, thick as fog. But mostly I remember my father in that garage every single day, looking for work, fixing neighbors' things for a few dollars here and there, never complaining, never giving up. It took him 8 months to find another job at a different mill for less money. But he took it without hesitation and never spoke a word of bitterness. That was the kind of man he was. Those 8 months taught me something important. Life doesn't owe you anything. You work hard, you stay steady, and you take care of your own. No excuses, no complaints. By the time I was 16, I was working a local garage after school, sweeping floors and learning everything I could. The owner, Pete Santos, was a gruff Italian man with arms like tree trunks and a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. But he knew engines like most people know their own names, and he saw something in me. "Kid," he told me one day, "you got the touch. Not everyone does. You feel what the machine needs. That's a gift." It was the first time anyone had called anything about me a gift. I worked harder after that, stayed later, asked more questions. By 18, I could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded and diagnose most problems just by listening. My dad died when I was 22. Heart attack at the mill, right there on the floor. He was 46 years old. They said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. I don't know if that made it better or worse. At his funeral, I stood there in my only suit, the same one I'd worn to high school graduation, and I made myself a promise. I'd honor him by living the way he taught me. Honest work, taking care of family, being a man who could fix things. I just didn't know then how hard that would be to keep. After Dad died, everything felt different. The world seemed harder somehow, colder. Mom aged 10 years and 10 months. My younger brother Tommy started getting into trouble. Nothing serious, just the kind of stupid stuff young men do when they're angry and don't know how to express it. My sister Marie got married at 19 and moved to Michigan. Just like that, the family scattered. I threw myself into work. Pete made me a full mechanic at his shop, and I was there from dawn until dark most days. The work was good, steady customers, decent pay, and I was learning something new every week. Cars were changing fast in the late 70s. Electronic ignition, fuel injection, all this new technology. But I kept up. I always kept up. That's when I met Linda. She came into the shop one Tuesday morning in 1979 with a beat-up Ford Pinto that was making a sound like a dying cat. She was 21, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a Jefferson Starship t-shirt. She had the most incredible smile I'd ever seen. "Can you save it?" she asked, patting the hood like it was a sick pet. "Probably," I said, try not to stare. "Might take a day or two. I need it for work. I'm a nurse at Mercy Hospital." Something about the way she said it. Practical, no nonsense, but with this warmth underneath, made me want to impress her. "I'll have it done by tomorrow morning," I heard myself say. Pete nearly killed me when I told him I'd be staying late. But I did it. I replaced the timing belt, fixed a leak in the exhaust system, and even cleaned the interior, which she hadn't asked for. When she came to pick it up the next morning, her face lit up. "You're a miracle worker," she said. "Just doing my job," I replied, suddenly feeling shy. She asked me to dinner that Friday. We went to a little Italian place on the east side, and we talked for 4 hours straight. She told me about her work at the hospital, about her family in Pennsylvania, about her dream of maybe becoming a nurse practitioner someday. I told her about my dad, about engines, about my dream of opening my own shop one day. "You will," she said, with such certainty that I believed her. We were married 8 months later, in a small ceremony at her church. My mom cried through the whole thing. Tommy was my best man, still rough around the edges, but cleaned up for the occasion. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Linda and I rented a small apartment near the hospital. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, a bathroom with tiles that were probably original to the 1940s. But it was ours. We painted the walls together, bought furniture from garage sales, made it into a home. In 1981, Sarah was born. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with my blue eyes and Linda's smile. I held her in the hospital, this tiny perfect thing, and felt terror and joy in equal measure. I was responsible for this life now. I had to do right by her. 2 years later, Michael came along. He was bigger, louder, more demanding than Sarah had been. But watching him and Sarah together, seeing her kiss his forehead and try to help with his bottles, I felt like the richest man in the world. We needed more money, though. Babies are expensive. Hospital bills, diapers, daycare while Linda worked her shifts. I was working 6 days a week at Pete's shop, but it wasn't enough. I needed my own place. In 1985, I did it. I took out a loan, a big, terrifying loan that made Linda nervous and kept me up at night. And I opened Bob's Auto Repair. Just a small garage with 2 bays on the south side of town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Those first few years were brutal. I worked 7 days a week, 16-hour days sometimes. I was mechanic, receptionist, janitor, bookkeeper, everything. Linda kept the books at night after the kids were asleep. We survived on coffee and determination. But slowly, steadily it grew. Word got around that Bob was honest, that he did good work for fair prices, that he stood behind what he did. Regular customers became friends. I hired my first employee, then a second. By 1990, we were doing well enough that Linda could cut back her nursing hours and spend more time with the kids. Sarah and Michael were growing up fast. Sarah was smart as a whip, straight A's, in every school activity, making me proud every single day. Michael was more like me, struggled with books, but could take apart and rebuild anything you gave him. They were my world, those two kids, and I thought I was building something that would last forever. The early 90s were good years for us. The shop was thriving. We'd saved enough to buy a small house in a decent neighborhood, and the kids were doing well. Sarah was in middle school, already talking about college. Michael was finding his way, playing baseball, and starting to show interest in working at the shop with me on weekends. Life felt solid, predictable in a good way. I understood the rhythm of it. Wake up early, go to work, fix cars, come home my family. Simple, but meaningful. Then in 1994, something happened that seemed small at the time, but would change everything. A customer named Dave Wilson came into the shop. Dave wasn't a regular. I'd maybe seen him twice before, but he drove a nice BMW that needed some brake work. While I was finishing up, we got to talking, the way you do with customers. He asked about business, and I told him things were good, steady. You ever think about investing, Bob? He asked, leaning against the workbench. Investing? Dave, I'm a mechanic. I invest in new equipment. That's about it. He laughed. No, I mean real investing. Stocks, companies, building wealth. I wiped my hands on a rag. That's for rich people, isn't it? That's what everyone thinks, he said. But that's how rich people stay rich. They invest. Even small amounts can grow if you choose right. Dave worked in finance, it turned out. Something about venture capital and startups. He started explaining how some companies, especially in technology, were poised to explode. How getting in early could mean massive returns. I'll be honest, most of it went over my head. But something about his enthusiasm was infectious. Look, he said, pulling out a business card, I'm putting together a group of investors for a little tech startup. It's a long shot, but the potential is enormous. Companies working on internet infrastructure, building the pipes for this whole digital future everyone's talking about. How much are we talking? I asked, more curious than serious. Minimum investment is $5,000. I almost laughed. $5,000 might as well have been $5 million. We had some savings, sure, but that was for emergencies, for the kids' future, for when the shop needed something major. That's way out of my league, Dave. Think about it, he said, taking his keys. That $5,000 could turn into $50,000 or more. It's a chance to change your family's future. I mentioned it to Linda that night, expecting her to dismiss it immediately. Instead, she got quiet, thoughtful. How sure is he about this company? She asked. He's not. He said it's a long shot. But if it works? He made it sound like we could make real money. Life-changing money. We stayed up late that night, talking through it. We had about $18,000 in savings. Taking out $5,000 would leave us exposed if something went wrong with the shop or if one of us got sick. But Dave's words kept echoing. A chance to change your family's future. Finally, Linda said, "What does your gut tell you?" My gut told me it was crazy. My gut told me to stick with what I knew. Engines and oil changes and steady work. But another part of me, a part one didn't usually listen to, wondered if this was my one shot at something bigger. Not for me, but for Sarah and Michael. For their futures. Let's do it, I said, surprising myself. We wrote the check a week later. $5,000 to a company I barely understood, on the word of a guy who got his breaks down at my shop. Linda and I held hands that night, feeling terrified and excited and foolish all at once. We're either going to look back on this as the smartest thing we ever did or the dumbest, I said. Either way, we did it together, Linda replied. Life went back to normal after that. The days turned into weeks, then months. Dave would stop by occasionally, give me vague updates about the company's progress. They were building infrastructure, securing contracts, positioning for growth. It all sounded promising in that unclear way that business talk always does. Meanwhile, Sarah was getting ready for high school. She wanted to join the debate team, take advanced classes, start thinking about which colleges she'd apply to. Michael was struggling more. His grades weren't great, and he was getting in a little bits of trouble at school. Nothing serious, but enough to worry me. I pushed him to work harder at school, but also brought him to the shop more often, teaching him the same way my father taught me, through doing, through watching, through the satisfaction of fixing something broken. "Dad, do I have to go to college?" he asked me one Saturday while we were replacing a transmission together. "You have to do something that makes you proud of yourself," I told him. "If that's college, fine. If it's something else, fine. But you have to work hard at whatever it is. No cutting corners." He nodded, focusing on the bolt he was removing. He was only 12, but I could already see the man he'd become. Someone who understood things with his hands, who found meaning in tangible work. I thought I was teaching him the right lessons. I thought I was being the father he needed. By the late 90s, something was shifting in our house, though I didn't want to admit it. Sarah was in high school now, and she was thriving in ways that made me proud, but also left me feeling a little lost. She talked about things I didn't understand. AP classes, SAT scores, college tours. She started looking at schools out of state, big universities that cost more than I made in a year. "Dad, I'm thinking about applying to Northwestern," she said one night at dinner. "Northwestern? That's in Illinois, right?" "Chicago. Yeah, they have an amazing journalism program." I put down my fork. "Journalism? I thought you wanted to be a nurse like your mom." She gave me this look, patient, but with an edge of frustration. "I never said that, Dad. You just assumed it." Linda touched my arm gently, a signal to let it go. But it stung. I've been working 70-hour weeks to build something for this family, and I didn't even know what my daughter wanted to do with her life. Michael was 15 now and working at the shop with me regularly. He was good with his hands, just like I'd been, but his grades were getting worse, and his teachers kept calling about missed assignments and cutting class. Linda worried constantly, but I figured he was just finding his way like boys do. "He's going to be fine," I kept telling her. "He's got a skill. He can always work with me." "That's not the point, Bob," she'd say. "He needs options. He needs to finish school properly." I didn't see why. I dropped out of college after one semester and done just fine, but I didn't say that out loud anymore. I'd learned that lesson. The shop was doing well, better than ever actually. I'd expanded to forbades and had 3 full-time employees. We were booked solid weeks in advance. By any measure, I was successful, but the college tuition looming ahead terrified me. I called Dave Wilson one day, asked about that investment we'd made years ago. "Oh, Bob, hey," he said, sounding genuinely happy to hear from me. "Yeah, the company's doing well. They're positioning for an IPO in the next few years." IPO, initial public offering, going public. That's when things could get really interesting for early investors like you. "So, should I expect anything soon?" "Hard to say exactly when, but yeah, you should see significant returns eventually. Just sit tight. Sit tight." That's what I've been doing for 5 years already. But I didn't push it. I wasn't that kind of guy. Then in 2000, everything changed. Not with the investment. That stayed mysteriously quiet. But with my marriage. I don't know exactly when Linda started pulling away. Maybe it had been happening for years, and I was too busy to notice. She'd gone back to full-time nursing, was taking extra shifts, seemed tired all the time. When we talked, it was about the kids' schedules, bills that needed paying, maintenance issues with the house. We didn't really talk anymore, not the way we used to. One night in September, after the kids were asleep, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with this look on her face that made my stomach drop. "Bob, we need to talk." Those 4 words. Everyone knows what they mean. "I'm not happy," she said quietly. "I haven't been happy for a long time." I stared at her, trying to understand. "What do you mean? We have a good life. The shop's doing great. The shop is doing great," she interrupted. "You have a shop. But where are we, Bob? When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time you asked about my day, my life, anything that matters to me?" I wanted to argue, to defend myself. But the truth was, I couldn't remember. All I did was work. Come home exhausted, eat dinner, maybe watch some TV, go to bed. Weekends are the same. Work, catch up on the shop's paperwork, worry about money. "I don't want a divorce," she continued, tears in her eyes now. But something has to change. We have to change. You have to change. I promised I would. I promised I'd work less, be home more, pay attention. And I meant it. I really did. But old habits are hard to break. The shop needed me. Customers depended on me. And honestly, the shop was where I felt confident, where I knew what I was doing. At home, with these conversations about feelings and connection, I was lost. The next few years were like watching something slowly fall apart, knowing you should fix it but not having the right tools. Linda and I went to marriage counseling for a while. We'd sit in this office with pale blue walls and a therapist named Patricia who asked questions that made me uncomfortable. Bob, when's the last time you and Linda went on a date? I couldn't remember. Years, maybe. What do you do for fun together? Nothing really. What attracted you to each other originally? That one I could answer. Linda's smile, her warmth, the way she made me feel like I could do anything. But somewhere along the way, we'd stop being Bob and Linda and just become the kids' parents or the shop owner and his wife. Sarah graduated high school in 2003. She got into Northwestern with a partial scholarship, but it still meant over $30,000 a year for what we had to cover. I took out loans, dipped into our savings, did whatever it took because that's what you do for your kids. The day we dropped her off at college, I helped carry boxes up to her dorm room. It was nice, nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived. Her roommate was from Connecticut, and her parents looked at me in my work boots and calloused hands like I was someone who'd come to fix the plumbing. "Dad, you're embarrassing me," Sarah whispered when I asked if she had enough money for books. That hurt, but I swallowed it, hugged her goodbye, and drove the 5 hours back home in silence while Linda cried quietly in the passenger seat. Michael graduated high school in 2005 barely. His grades were terrible, and he had no interest in college. He wanted to work at the shop full-time, and honestly, I was relieved. At least one of my kids wanted to follow in my footsteps. But Linda saw it differently. "He's wasting his potential," she'd say. "He's settling. He's working." I'd shoot back. "He's learning a trade. What's wrong with that?" We fought about it constantly. We fought about money. We fought about how much time I spent at the shop. We fought about how she was never home anymore, always picking up extra shifts, always too tired to talk. The truth was, we'd become strangers who happened to live in the same house. Sarah came home for Thanksgiving that year with her new boyfriend, Chad. He was a business major from Ohio, wore sweaters that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill, and talked about market positioning and brand optimization. I had no idea what he was saying half the time. At dinner, he asked what I did, and I told him I own an auto repair shop. "Oh, that's cool," he said, in a tone that clearly meant it wasn't cool at all. "Kind of dying industry though, right? With electric cars coming." Michael jumped in. "Dad's shop is always booked solid. People always need good mechanics." "For now," Chad said, smiling like he knew something we didn't. I saw Sarah shoot him a look, but she didn't defend me. That's what hurt most. My own daughter, sitting there, embarrassed by what I did for a living. That night, after everyone went to bed, Linda found me in the garage, sitting in my truck. "You okay?" she asked. "Do you think I'm an embarrassment?" I asked, not looking at her. She was quiet for a long time. "No, Bob. You're a good man. You work hard. But what? But you're also stubborn. You're stuck in your ways. And you don't seem to care about growing or changing or, I don't know, being part of the world beyond that shop." "The shop is what pays for everything," I said. "It's what paid for Sarah's fancy school and that boyfriend who looks down on us. That's not fair, isn't it?" She went back inside, and I sat there until the cold drove me in. 2 years later, in 2007, Linda asked for a divorce. Not during a fight, not after some big dramatic moment. Just calmly, over breakfast on a Tuesday morning. "I've been unhappy for too long, Bob. We both have, even if you won't admit it. I need something different." I wanted to fight it, to convince her to stay. But the truth was, I was exhausted too. Exhausted from pretending everything was fine. Exhausted from coming home to tension and silence. Exhausted from being made to feel like who I was, a mechanic, a working man, wasn't good enough. "Okay," I said. Just like that, 28 years of marriage ended with a single word. The divorce process was brutal. Not because Linda was vindictive. She wasn't. But because lawyers get involved and suddenly everything becomes a negotiation, a transaction. Who gets what? Who pays what? How to divide a life you built together into two separate, smaller lives. Linda wanted the house. I understood that. She'd been the one who really made it a home anyway. But that meant I had to buy her out of her half, and we'd refinanced a few times over the years to pay for Sarah's college. There wasn't much equity left. We had to sell it. Watching strangers walk through our house, opening closets, judging the worn carpet in the hallway, pointing out how the kitchen was outdated, it felt like being gutted. This was where Sarah took her first steps, where Michael lost his first tooth, where Linda and I used to slow dance in the living room on Saturday nights, back when we still did things like that. The house sold in 2008, right before the market crashed. At least we were lucky there. But after paying off the mortgage and splitting what little was left, I walked away with maybe $40,000, half of what we'd built in nearly 30 years. Linda got an apartment near the hospital. I got a smaller one on the other side of town, in a complex where the parking lot lights flickered and someone was always arguing at 3 in the morning. I was 52 years old, living alone in a place that smelled like cigarettes from the previous tenant, sleeping on a mattress on the floor until I could afford real furniture. I'd wake up some mornings and forget where I was, reach for Linda, find empty space. The shop kept me going. At least there I knew what I was doing. At least there I was still Bob, not the divorced guy or Linda's ex-husband. But the recession hit hard in 2009. People kept their cars longer, did their own oil changes, put off major repairs. Business dropped off a cliff. I had to lay off 2 employees, guys who depended on those jobs, who had families to feed. That hurt almost as much as the divorce. The worst part, though, was the kids. Sarah had graduated from Northwestern by then and moved to Chicago. She got a job at a marketing firm, was engaged to Chad. She called occasionally, dutiful phone calls where we talk about the weather and her job and everything except what really mattered. "Are you coming home for Christmas?" I asked that fall. "We're going to Chad's parents' place in Columbus," she said. "His mom is really insistent." "What about seeing me?" "Dad, Columbus is 4 hours away. Maybe we can visit another time." Another time never came. Michael still worked at the shop, but things were strained between us. He blamed me for the divorce, even though he didn't say it directly. He'd show up late, leave early, barely talk to me except about work stuff. One afternoon, we got into it. "You need to focus," I told him after he messed up a brake job. "This isn't just some hobby. This is our livelihood." "Maybe I don't want it to be my livelihood," he shot back. "Maybe I'm sick of spending every day covered in grease, barely making enough money to survive, turning into you." "What's wrong with being me?" I asked hurt. He just looked at me, and I saw in his eyes the same thing I'd seen in Sarah's eyes, in Linda's eyes. Disappointment. Pity. "Nothing, Dad," he said finally. "Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. That look haunted me. I started calling Dave Wilson regularly, asking about that investment. It had been 15 years. Where were these big returns he promised? "The market's tough right now, Bob," he'd say. "Just hang in there." But hanging in there was getting harder. I was bleeding money. Legal fees, 2 households to maintain on my own, business dropping. I thought about selling those shares, but Dave convinced me not to. "You're so close," he'd say. "The company's positioned to explode. Another year or 2, max." So I held on. Because what else did I have? By 2010, I'd lost 20 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, and was taking antacids like candy for the ulcer I was pretty sure I had. I'd built a life, a business, a family, and watched it all crumble despite doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. Work hard, provide, be responsible, take care of your family. Apparently, that wasn't enough. Sarah called me on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2012. I was under a Honda Civic, replacing a rusted muffler, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, hands covered in grime, but something made me wipe them off and pick up. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," she said. No hello, no how are you. Straight to business, like Chad probably taught her. "Sure, honey. What's up?" "Chad and I are getting married in June. We've set a date, booked the venue. Everything's moving forward." My heart jumped. "That's great. Where? When exactly?" "Oh, Dad, wait. Let me finish." Her tone stopped me cold. "We're having a small ceremony. Very intimate. Just close family and friends. And we've decided to keep it really tight. Limited space, you know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I was waiting for the part where she told me the details so I could plan, maybe rent a tux, practice what I'd say when I walked her down the aisle. "Mom's going to be there, obviously," She continued, each word careful, measured. And Chad's whole family. But we really need to keep the numbers down, and the pause stretched out so long I thought the call had dropped. Sarah, you're not invited, Dad. For words. Simple, direct, devastating. I stood there in my shop, grease still under my fingernails, phone pressed to my ear, trying to understand what I just heard. I'm not invited to my daughter's wedding. It's not personal, Dad. It's just, look, this is my day, and I need it to be perfect. And you just be uncomfortable anyway. You don't know any of our friends. You'd have nothing to talk to Chad's family about. It would be awkward for everyone. I'm your father, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know, and I love you. But honestly, you're an embarrassment, okay? I'm sorry to be blunt, but you asked. You show up in work clothes half the time. You smell like motor oil. You don't understand anything about my life or my world. Chad's family is sophisticated. This wedding is important for his career connections. I just can't. Each word hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd worked myself to the bone to put through college. She was ashamed of me. Sarah, please, I've already made up my mind, Dad. Please respect that. I have to go. We'll talk later. She hung up. I stood there for I don't know how long, phone in hand, the dial tone buzzing. Eventually, one of my guys, Marcus, came over. Boss, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I lied. Just family stuff. I went back under the Honda Civic and worked the rest of the day on autopilot. But something inside me had broken in a way I didn't know could break. This wasn't like the divorce, which had been mutual, inevitable. This was my child actively choosing to exclude me from one of the most important days of her life because I wasn't good enough. That night, in my apartment, I sat in the dark and cried for the first time since my father's funeral. Not quiet tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs. Everything I'd sacrificed, every long hour, every missed dinner, every time I chose work over rest because I was building something for them. And this is what it came to. My daughter was too ashamed to have me at her wedding. I called Michael. No answer. Tried again the next day. Nothing. Finally texted, "Did you know about Sarah's wedding?" His reply came 3 hours later. "She told me. And you didn't think I should know? Not my place to tell you, Dad. Besides, she's probably right. You wouldn't fit in there anyway." Not my place. Wouldn't fit in. My own son agreed. I was an embarrassment. I want to work the next day and every day after, because that's what you do. You keep going. But something fundamental had changed. I'd spent my whole life trying to be like my father. Strong, steady, responsible, providing for my family no matter what. And it hadn't mattered at all. The years after Sarah's wedding, the wedding I watched happen through Facebook photos posted by relatives, standing in the back like I wasn't even supposed to be seeing them. Those years were the loneliest of my life. I was 56 years old, living in that cramped apartment, running a shop that was barely breaking even, and estranged from both my children. Michael eventually quit working for me, said he needed to find his own path, which I understood. But really, I think he just couldn't stand being around me anymore. He got a job at a dealership across town, and our conversations dwindled to occasional text messages on birthdays and holidays. Sarah had a baby in 2013, my first grandchild, a little girl named Emma. I found out through a group text message, along with about 15 other people. When I asked if I could visit, Sarah said they were still adjusting and would let me know when the time was right. That time never came. I'd see pictures sometimes. Emma's first steps, her second birthday party, her first day of preschool. Always through social media, never in person. I was a ghost in my own family's life. The shop struggled on. Some months were okay. Others I barely made rent. I sold my truck and bought an older, cheaper one. Stopped going out to eat. Learned to live on very little. Pride wouldn't let me ask Linda or the kids for help, even if they would have given it. But here's what none of them knew, what I never told anyone. That investment I made back in 1994, the one everyone thought was a waste of money, it was still there, and it wasn't worthless. Dave Wilson had mostly stopped returning my calls by 2015, but I still had the paperwork, still had the stock certificates locked in a drawer. I'd look at them sometimes, these pieces of paper representing shares in a company I barely understood, and wonder if they meant anything at all. Then in 2016, something changed. I got a letter from a law firm representing the company. They were finally going public, and as an early investor, my shares were being converted. The letter included a valuation. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it. My $5,000 investment, the one Linda and I had agonized over 22 years earlier, was now worth approximately $847,000. And the lawyers predicted it would grow significantly more once the IPO was complete. I sat in my apartment, hands shaking, staring at that number. $847,000. More money than I'd made in the last 10 years combined. Money that could change everything. My first instinct was to call Sarah, to call Michael, to tell them. To show them that their old man wasn't as much of a failure as they thought. That I'd taken a risk, made a smart decision, and it had paid off. But I didn't call. Because what would I say? See, I'm not an embarrassment after all because I have money. Would that suddenly make me worthy of being at my daughter's wedding? Would that make Michael respect me again? The money didn't change who I was. I was still Bob the mechanic. Still the guy who smelled like motor oil and didn't understand fancy conversations. Still the father they decided wasn't good enough. So I kept quiet. Didn't tell anyone. Not Linda, not the kids, not a single person. I kept working at the shop, kept living in my small apartment, kept being invisible in my children's lives. But I watched the investment grow. By 2018, it was worth over $1 million. By 2020, nearly $1.5 million. The company had become successful, was expanding, was profitable in ways Dave had promised all those years ago. I could have retired, could have bought a nice house, a new truck, travel the world. But what was the point? The money didn't fill the emptiness. It didn't make me miss my kids any less. It didn't change the fact that my daughter thought I was an embarrassment or that my son couldn't stand to be around me. Sometimes I draft messages to them. Long texts explaining everything, apologizing for not being the father they wanted, telling them about the investment, asking if we could start over. But I never sent them, because I knew the truth. They didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted a different father, someone sophisticated and educated and comfortable in their worlds. And I couldn't be that person, no matter how much money I had. I turned 65 in 2021. Medicare kicked in. Social Security started. I could have sold the shop, but what would I do with my days? Work was all I knew, all I had left. The investment kept growing. By 2023, it was worth over $2 million. I was technically a wealthy man, living like a pauper, completely alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole life working to provide for my family. And when I finally had real wealth, I had no family to share it with. The thing they judged me for, being just a mechanic, being poor, being unsophisticated, wasn't even true. But it didn't matter, because money can't buy back time, can't buy back trust, can't buy back your daughter's wedding or your son's respect, or any of the 1,000 small moments I'd missed with my grandchildren. I'd kept this secret for nearly 30 years, and it had become a weight I carried every day, getting heavier with each passing year. The smooth transition from past to present brought me to where I am today, still holding on to something that could change everything, wondering if it's too late for any of it to matter. I'm 68 years old now. The shop is still running, though I've cut back to 4 days a week. My body doesn't move like it used to, and arthritis makes some jobs harder than they should be. But I still show up, still do the work, because it's who I am. The investment is worth nearly $3 million now. A fortune by any measure. Enough to change my children's lives, to set up trust funds for grandchildren I barely know, to make all their worries about money disappear. But I still haven't told them, and I don't know if I ever will. Because here's what I've learned after all these years. You can't fix a broken relationship with money any more than you can fix a broken engine with the wrong tools. The problem isn't what I have or don't have in the bank. The problem is that somewhere along the way, we stop seeing each other as people. They stopped seeing me as anything more than an embarrassment, and I stopped seeing them as anything more than judges who found me lacking. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe I should have tried harder, been more flexible, learned to speak their language. Or maybe I did the best I could with what I had, and sometimes that's just not enough. The lesson I take from all this, the one thing I want anyone listening to understand, is that success isn't measured in the things people can see. Not in the size of your house, or the prestige of your job, or even in the balance of your bank account. Real success is measured in the relationships you maintain, the love you share, the bridges you refuse to burn even when it would be easier to walk away. I built a business. I made a smart investment. By any objective measure, I succeeded. But I lost my family along the way, and no amount of money can change that. So if you're listening to this and you're fighting with your parents, or your kids, or anyone you love, don't wait. Don't let pride or hurt feelings or misunderstanding build walls that become too high to climb. Talk to each other. Really talk. Before time runs out and you're sitting alone in a small apartment, surrounded by success that means nothing because there's no one to share it with. As for me, I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll reach out to Sarah and Michael one more time, not to tell them about the money, but just to say I love them, I'm proud of them, and I'm sorry for whatever part one played in us drifting apart. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep this secret until I'm gone, leave them everything in a will, and let them figure out that their embarrassing father was carrying something valuable all along. Either way, I'm still Bob, still a mechanic, still a man who fixes things, even if I could never quite figure out how to fix what mattered most. And I suppose that's my story, proof that you can win and lose at the same time, and that sometimes the heaviest things we carry aren't in our hands, but in our hearts.